Today, you can walk onto any beach wearing a swimsuit and think nothing of it. You can move freely, swim competitively, wear what fits your body, your comfort, your choice. But it wasn't always this way. And the reason you have that freedom might just be because one woman refused to cover up. In the early 1900s, women were arrested for exposing too much skin at the beach, not for nudity, but for wearing something practical. A swimsuit that fit, a swimsuit made for movement, not modesty. Annette Kellerman was a swimmer, a performer, and a rebel. When she stepped into the ocean in a form-fitting one-piece, the police pulled her out. The world called it indecent. She called it freedom. And in that single act of defiance, Annette didn't just challenge a dress code. She cracked open the cage of female shame. Her body was not the problem. The system's fear of it was. She was arrested, yes, but she also made headlines, inspired protests, changed swimwear laws, and gave women permission to be strong, visible, and unapologetically physical. This isn't just a fashion story, it's a liberation story. Because sometimes the most radical thing a woman can do is wear exactly what lets her move. Chapter 1. Dressed to Drown. The Absurdity of Women's Swimwear Before Annette. In the early 1900s, the idea of a woman entering the ocean wasn't about athleticism. It wasn't about health or freedom. It was a carefully managed ritual, governed not by the body's need to move, but by society's fear of what that movement might reveal. To swim, as a woman, was to wrap yourself in wool. Long sleeves, skirts to the calves, bloomers underneath, and often a belt to hold it all together. Some suits came with weights sewn into the hems, so the fabric wouldn't float up and risk exposing skin. Yes, weights. In water. Swimwear wasn't about motion. It was about modesty, engineered restraint. It was designed not to help you swim, but to signal virtue. A signal to society that said, I am decent, I am contained, I am covered. But that coverage came at a cost. Try moving your arms with soaked wool dragging at your shoulders. Try kicking your legs while skirts wrap around your knees like seaweed. It was slow, dangerous, sometimes even fatal. Drowning wasn't just a risk, it was a design flaw. And yet, no one questioned it. Because a woman's body in motion, uncontained, visible, functional, was more threatening than the idea of a woman drowning fully clothed. That was the absurd logic Annette Kellerman inherited. Born in Australia in 1886, Annette was no stranger to movement. She had bowed legs as a child and was prescribed swimming for strength and recovery. What started as rehabilitation quickly became mastery. She trained hard, swam harder, and within years was breaking records in a sport that most women weren't even allowed to practice in public. But even as she gained fame for her ability, the expectations around what she wore remained unchanged. She was expected to swim like a man while dressed like a draped curtain. And Annette had a problem with that. She saw the hypocrisy, felt the restriction, and knew instinctively that this wasn't about fabric. It was about fear. A culture's fear of the female body unbound. So she designed something else. A one-piece, form-fitting swimsuit. No skirts, no sleeves, no apology. It hugged the body like a second skin, made not for modesty, but for mobility. It was a radical statement in wool and stitching, not because it revealed too much, but because it treated the female body as something functional. It said, this body is not here for display. It is here to move, to compete, to live. And when she wore it, when she stepped into the ocean, not just as a woman, but as an athlete, she didn't just swim. She confronted a century of shame. Annette Kellerman didn't ask for a revolution. She wore one. And in doing so, she proved that sometimes, to change the world, you don't need a speech. You just need to walk into the water, wearing exactly what sets you free. Chapter 2. The arrest that made headlines and history. The water was calm, the day unremarkable, until a woman walked into the sea wearing freedom. It was 1907, and Annette Kellerman had just arrived in the United States. Already famous in Australia and Europe for her long-distance swims and underwater performances, she was no stranger to public attention. But this day in Boston would not be remembered for her athleticism. It would be remembered for what she wore. A one-piece swimsuit, not scandalous by modern standards, but revolutionary at the time. The suit was modest by today's standards, black, full coverage, functional. But it lacked one crucial element of decency in early 20th century America: layers. There were no bloomers, no petticoats, no skirts to hide the shape of her body. And that was all it took. A police officer pulled her from the water. She was arrested for indecent exposure. The headlines followed swiftly. Some were salacious, some were mocking, but all of them missed the point. This wasn't about fabric. It was about fear. Fear of a woman who refused to hide herself. Fear of a body in motion, unapologetic and uncontained. Kellerman didn't flinch. She knew exactly what was happening. The arrest was not just a punishment. It was a performance. The law, the culture, the spectacle, they were all playing out their roles in a society deeply anxious about women who didn't stay in their place. But Annette had no intention of retreating. She used the headlines not as warnings, but as a platform. She spoke publicly. She defended her swimsuit. She challenged the hypocrisy of a system that celebrated male athletes in trunks, but criminalized women for wanting the same freedom. And people listened. What began as a single act of rebellion rippled outward. Women began writing letters to newspapers in her defense. Public debate erupted over swimwear laws. Some joined Kellerman's cause, while others clutched their pearls, but the conversation had begun. The idea that a woman's body could be practical, strong, and visible had breached the surface. That arrest, intended to humiliate, backfired. It made Annette a symbol, not of scandal, but of self-determination, of a new kind of femininity, unafraid, unhidden, and unstoppable. The swimsuit was no longer just a piece of clothing. It became a weapon of quiet revolution. Her arrest didn't end her career, it expanded it. She continued performing, speaking, writing. She toured the world with her aquatic ballet, wrote books on health and fitness, and even developed her own line of swimwear for women. Functional, beautiful, and defiant. In Boston, she was dragged out of the ocean. But around the world, she dove straight into history. And that's the paradox of power. It often looks like a woman doing something perfectly ordinary until someone tries to stop her. Then, and only then, do you realize she wasn't just swimming. She was making history. Chapter 3, More Than a Swimsuit, How Annette Built a Philosophy of Power and Health. Annette Kellerman didn't set out to be a rebel. She set out to swim, freely, efficiently, and without apology. But when the world made that simple act a scandal, she didn't just fight back. She built a philosophy. Because for her, the swimsuit was never just about fashion. It was about function, and something far deeper, the freedom to inhabit your body without shame. In a time when women were taught to shrink themselves, to sit still, dress modestly, speak softly, Annette's message was bold. Your body is not a sin, it's a system, a powerful, intelligent, adaptable vessel, not something to hide, but something to train, understand, and respect. Her ideas about physicality were decades ahead of their time. She believed movement wasn't just healthy, it was liberating. She promoted swimming not as spectacle, but as self-care, and unlike the culture around her, she didn't see beauty as the enemy of strength. She embodied both. Long before modern fitness culture emerged, Annette was touring the world teaching women how to stretch, move, and build resilience. She wrote books, How to Swim, Physical Beauty, How to Keep It, and The Body Beautiful. They weren't vanity manuals. They were calls to action. She urged women to stop chasing frailty and start claiming vitality. She taught them that discipline could be joyful, that health could be glamorous, and that strength wasn't a masculine quality. It was a human right. In many ways, Annette was practicing feminism before the word had global traction. But her version wasn't just political. It was physical. She knew that a woman who felt strong in her body became stronger in every room she entered. That confidence wasn't just built in boardrooms or ballots. It was forged in sweat, breath, and presence. And for her, water was the ultimate teacher. In water, there was no corset, no skirt, no permission needed, just fluidity, resistance, rhythm, a conversation between body and environment that required full presence and power. She wanted women to have that experience, not just physically, but philosophically. To know their limits and expand them, to listen to their bodies and trust them, to look in the mirror and see function, not flaw. And so, what began with a swimsuit became a wellness movement, a challenge to the aesthetic prison women were placed in, and a redefinition of beauty as agency. Annette didn't just change what women wore, she changed how they stood in themselves. She offered not just garments, but a gateway to self-respect, health, and unapologetic embodiment. Because in her eyes, the real scandal wasn't skin. It was a society afraid of a woman who moved, without asking permission. Chapter 5. Her legacy is still in the water. Annette Kellerman didn't just change swimwear. She changed the relationship between women and movement. Before her, the ocean was off limits, not by law, always, but by expectation. Women could dip, maybe wade, never swim. And when they did, they had to wrap themselves in shame disguised as cloth. Heavy layers meant to tether their bodies to land, as if freedom itself was something dangerous. Annette stripped that away. She didn't do it with a rally. She didn't do it with politics. She did it with a swimsuit. And then she did it again and again. Every performance, every book, every new design, every time she dove into the water and reminded the world that a woman's body was not a scandal. It was a tool, a vessel, a place of strength and sovereignty. The ripple effect was profound. Within a generation, the one-piece swimsuit became standard. Within decades, women were competing in Olympic swimming events, wearing streamlined suits Annette had helped normalize. She was the first woman to appear fully nude in a Hollywood film, not as provocation, but as power. The movie was A Daughter of the Gods, and she was paid more than any actress in the world at the time. She pioneered what it meant to be visible and autonomous, to own her image, her movement, her narrative. But more than any performance or paycheck, Annette gave women back something they didn't even know they'd lost. The right to be physical without apology, to sweat, to stretch, to be fast, loud, ambitious, expansive, to be seen in the fullness of their bodies, not as objects, but as agents. And that's why her story still matters. Because every woman who swims freely today, every athlete who trains without shame, every girl who grows up believing strength is beautiful, owes something to Annette Kellerman. Not because she asked for admiration, but because she insisted on freedom. Her legacy doesn't live in textbooks. It lives in motion, in water. In every moment, a woman chooses functionality over fantasy, performance over politeness, presence over perfection. Annette didn't just make history, she moved it, not with noise, but with elegant defiance. So the next time you walk into the ocean, in a swimsuit designed for strength, not shame, remember her. Remember the woman who was arrested for what she wore and applauded for how she rose. She didn't sink under shame. She dove headfirst into history and left the world changed in her wake. Annette Kellerman didn't yell. She didn't demand. She didn't ask for permission. She simply stepped into the water, wearing something that let her move, and in doing so, she exposed not just skin, but the fear a society had of women who wouldn't stay still. Her swimsuit was never just fabric, it was a statement, a refusal to let shame dictate what a woman could do with her body. She didn't fight with fists, she fought with form, with grace, with motion, with the radical act of being visible on her own terms. Her arrest didn't silence her, it amplified her. Her fame didn't trap her, it funded her mission. And her beauty wasn't a distraction, it was a doorway she walked through on her own path. Annette Kellerman didn't just change what women wore, she changed what women were allowed to be. Athletes, performers, designers, free. And she did it not by becoming someone else, but by being entirely herself in a world that wasn't ready. That's power, not given, taken, not loud, certain. Her legacy isn't just in the history books, it's in the water, in every one-piece swimsuit, in every woman who trains, competes, or dares to move without apology. Because she wasn't just swimming. She was saying, I belong here, in this body, in this world, unafraid. And now, so do you. Oh,